Welcome to the Neo News Today podcast. This is your host, Dylan, speaking with you. On episode 25 of the NNT pod, we had a chance to sit down with Roman Khimov, the principal software engineer of St. Petersburg Competence Center, the team that has been tasked with developing the distributed file storage system for the Neo ecosystem. This was the first time on the podcast we had a chance to speak with members from NeoSPCC, and this was actually the first time I had a chance to speak with Roman, though I've met several other members of the team at various conferences. In this conversation, we discussed Roman's background in networking and his current day-to-day, which largely involves working on the Go version of the Neo consensus nodes. We also discussed what differentiates Neo nodes from Neo nodes that are written in other programming languages, how the work on the current iteration of the Neo 2 blockchain is impacting and relevant towards Neo 3 work. We also discussed other topics surrounding the ongoing conversations of Neo 3 and what the NeoSPCC team finds interesting. Such topics included oracles, governance, and others. And then lastly, we discussed outreach to communities of other developer languages, both what that looks like online and through physical events like conferences. So without any further ado, here is my conversation with Roman. Hey guys, what's going on? Dylan with the Neo News Today podcast. Today we are talking with Roman Khimov of the St. Petersburg Competence Center team, NeoSPCC for short. How are you doing today, Roman?
Oh yeah, thanks. I'm fine. Hello, everyone.
So thank you so much for joining the pod. I've had a chance to meet a lot of your teammates at DevCon as well as at the Community Assembly last year, but you and I haven't met in person yet. So could you share with the Neo News Today podcast listeners a little bit of information about yourself and your background?
Well, I have joined the NSPC in August 2019, so I guess that's the reason why we haven't yet met in person. And previously, I've worked in different companies, mostly on networking equipment, things like UTM solutions, switches, networking switches, and some things like that. Yeah.
Cool. So how did you get interested then in distributed or decentralized development?
Well, that's kind of an interesting topic, and I have a friend that basically introduced me to it, and here at NSPC. So NSPC offered me a job related to it, so that's, I think, how I got involved.
Awesome. So you got involved through a friendship.
Yeah.
Cool. So on the NSPCC website, it says that your title with the project is as a principal software engineer. So what does that role entail in your day-to-day?
Well, my day-to-day job is basically maintaining and evolving NeoGO. That is an implementation of the Neo node. So I guess I'm driving this project now, so that's why it's called this way.
Could you, because typically our editor at Neo News Today, Edge, he covers more of the technical sort of news and documents that come out of the Neo ecosystem. So I'm not quite familiar with what NeoGO is, and maybe some of our listeners aren't. So could you tell us a little bit more about what NeoGO is?
Well, NeoGO is a complete Neo node implementation that includes all the components that you probably would expect from Neo node. It has a networking part to communicate with peers via P2P protocol. It has RPC component to it and can relay transactions from RPC into P2P. It also has some CLI to do some things like asset management or things like that. It has a virtual machine inside to run your smart contracts, and it also has a smart contract compiler from Go to AVM, and probably the most unique feature from nodes from alternative node implementations is that it can participate in consensus. So it can run full DBFT protocol and can actually interoperate with C# nodes. So basically, it can be a complete substitute of C# node.
And I noticed in recent articles that have come out of NSPCC that there is improvements that the NeoGO node has made compared to other languages. So could you tell us a little bit about how NeoGO might be better than or more faster or more efficient than some of the other Neo nodes that are in different languages?
Well, I guess from the beginning of the project, we were more concerned with deep technical aspects of it and some core functionality like running a consensus node instead of UI things like some fancy buttons to make transfers or claiming gas and things like that. So that kind of gave us a direction to implement more of this core functionality, and so we are the only alternative implementation that can run in consensus. That I guess is the main feature that we have. And also, although we haven't really optimized our node yet, but at the same time, we are trying to compare it with the C# implementation performance-wise. So that's why we actually even started a project called NeoBench to create some reproducible tested environment so that you can compare different nodes against. And our testing that we have made in January and this month actually shows that our node runs even better than the original. It can process more transactions per second, and it does so using less CPU and less memory. So that's what we have.
Very cool. And so is NeoBench right now running on the Neo testnet, or has there been any testing on Neo mainnet?
NeoBench actually is a separate framework that runs a private network inside of it. So it has Dockerized images of consensus nodes that it uses internally to run tests against. It has no relation to mainnet or testnet. It basically doesn't care. It just pushes some transactions to this private network and watches what happens, whether these transactions get processed and how fast it all goes. As for the testnet and mainnet, we actually have 4 RPC nodes in mainnet that are running NeoGO. We have been running them since autumn. I can't quite remember which month exactly, but for quite some time. These are just RPC nodes, so they do accept blocks, they process it, they provide RPC service, they can relay some transactions for you and from RPC to P2P network, and that's it. As for the testnet, actually just previous week, we have replaced one of consensus nodes that NeoSPCC has in testnet with NeoGO. And our current release, 0.73, actually runs as a consensus node in testnet right now. So it signs blocks, proposes blocks, does everything that a consensus node is supposed to be doing, and does it well, I think. With full interoperability with C#, because the other consensus nodes in testnet are obviously running C# nodes, and just one of them is NeoGO.
That's pretty exciting to start seeing Neo's consensus nodes implement a new language. It kind of adds a little bit of resiliency to the consensus node infrastructure.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, I think it's very important for the project to have different implementations of nodes in different languages that are probably written against some common spec, follow this spec, and interoperate with each other on this level. So I think it's very important for the project.
Mm-hmm. And are you planning on implementing any other sort of metrics or data points for NeoBench and for how it monitors NeoGO?
NeoBench actually produces its results in just plain text file, and you can analyze them in whatever fashion you want after that. We don't have some extensive tooling around that at the moment because actually we started this spin-off project in around December, and it has a lot of things can be improved there. So its functionality at the moment probably is quite limited, but still it was and is a very useful tool for us, because it actually allowed us not only test our performance, but to also uncover some bugs and really put some stress into our consensus implementation. I mean, DBFT implementation. So it's very useful.
And currently, a lot of the work that you've done for NeoBench and for NeoGO has been done with Neo 2. So what does, looking forward, the next iteration of the blockchain, what does Neo 3 implementation for NeoGO and NeoBench look like?
At the moment, we haven't yet started working on Neo 3 support, but I think we're gonna start doing that in March. Because at the moment we are finishing some UI things in NeoGO. As I have said earlier, we were from the beginning mostly concerned with the inner working of the blockchain and less concerned with UI things. So we are currently improving our CLI and RPC, and that work also is relevant for Neo 3. So I think we are not losing our time still working on Neo 2. because all things that we are currently doing will also be relevant for Neo 3. And we will start working on Neo 3 in March, and I hope that we will be able to produce to deliver 1.0 version of NeoGO at the same time as Neo 3.0 makes an official release.
That's quite exciting. So as we maybe take a step back and look at the broader Neo ecosystem and transitioning from version 2 of the current iteration of the blockchain to the third version, what is your opinion of the current and ongoing development that's going into Neo 3? Maybe not just from NeoSPCC, but for the broader ecosystem in general. What's your perspective for ongoing development for Neo 3?
We are, of course, closely tracking the development of Neo 3. I think one of the most interesting things for us that is being done is Oracle's support. We are also very interested in state discussions around the state and how to manage it on Neo 3. We actually think that tying it to block is probably the best idea, and rather than doing it in some other fashion, like splitting it from the block. Yeah. So I think that's probably the most interesting discussions for us that are concerned with, again, inner workings of the blockchain. Of course, there is also a very interesting discussion around governance model and things around that, but that's mostly non-technical, at least from my perspective. It mostly relates some economic issues, and I just don't think I'm competent enough to really make a judgment for such topics. But some ideas floating around there are also very interesting, like inflationary gas. Who knows? Maybe that's what we should be doing, or maybe not. That's a bit tougher question.
Sure. So I guess maybe looking forward, once you've built your suite of tools and NeoSPCC has provided NeoFS, which is not necessarily a product you're working on, but what do the next steps look like once the suite of tools have been developed? Is there any particular strategy for reaching out to businesses or industry partners or even specific verticals that the team would like to introduce its products to?
Well, that's probably a business question more than as an engineer. It's a bit probably hard for me to again make some to think about it. But from an engineering perspective, I can also say that alternative implementations of Neo node like NeoGO also help to reach some other developer communities, because C# developers and Go developers basically don't intersect much. These are quite different communities, and just having this alternative implementation allows to reach some other developers that couldn't be reached otherwise. So I think that can probably create some useful opportunities for business side also, although how to exactly push them, I'm not sure.
Yeah. So what does that look like then from your perspective as the engineer? Does that mean that you go to more conferences? Does this mean that you engage more online engineering communities to kind of share the work that has been done in Go and to start collaborating with devs who code in other languages?
I think, we do have this thing that we can talk about with other Go developers, whether in some conferences or other meetings. And actually, our employees of NeoSPCC have already participated in some conferences related to Go language, and they really talked about things that we've been doing here at NeoSPCC. Not exactly NeoGO at the moment, but that allows us to more easily reach these people and to have something to talk about.
Very cool. So for you and your team, what are some of the next steps?
I think for me and for NeoGo project, it's very important to transition to Neo 3 development. So that probably is the main target for us, to just finish things that we haven't yet done in Neo 2 and move on. Because we've been watching looking at Neo 3 development and actually wanting to also introduce some of the features of Neo 3 into NeoGo, but at the same time, I think we should finish Neo 2 development first. So that's what we are concentrating on at the moment. But as soon as we finish that, we will all just go Neo 3. And I hope that we will be fast enough to catch up with the team, with the C# development team.
Awesome. Well, you guys are very busy over at NeoSPCC, and I really enjoy following along with the technical updates that come out of the various teams and from the project. So I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing your time with the Neo News Today podcast, and for allowing our listeners to learn a little bit more about NeoSPCC from your perspective.
Okay, thanks.
Well, what did you think of that conversation? I thought it was really interesting to learn that NeoSPCC aims to begin working on their Neo 3 implementations as soon as March of this year, and that they're expecting to launch the NeoGo node on mainnet around the same time as the tentative Neo 3 release, expected to occur at some point in Q2 or Q3 of 2020. To keep up to date with the latest news, information, and events in the Neo ecosystem, please visit www.neonewstoday.com. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to our channels over at YouTube, Apple iTunes, and or Spotify. And go ahead and leave a 5-star review and maybe even a comment if you feel that others should hear the content we're releasing here at NNT. Every review our community members and fans leave on this various social media platforms help others learn more about the Neo News Today podcast and what is happening in the Neo ecosystem. So I just want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to the Neo News Today podcast, and I look forward to catching you on the next one.